I'm Ed Farquarson. I'm at the PPI Days conference in London, and I was catching up with Jane and Diane yesterday, and I gather there have been some interesting questions on the MOOC with regard to the role of PPP units. And I thought I'd just say a few words about those. It's interesting, if you look at successful PPP programs around the world, usually at the heart of those programs you will find some source of internal government expertise involved, either at the central government level or at a regional government level. So there seems to be some evidence to show that there's positive correlation between having this body of expertise in a government and good PPP program management. Now the question was asked about what do these units do? And we surveyed, in fact, our PPP units across the EU region quite recently. And there are basically three main functions that these units do. They are different and they combine in different ways, but you could almost use the PPP word here. The first is that they have a role as a sort of policeman, in the sense that some of them perform a role of approving projects, ensuring there's quality control, and also things like managing fiscal risk. They're sort of policeman oversight role. The second role is probably you could call a policy role. In other words, they are a source of central expertise within a government, helping to write the rules of PPP for that particular government. And you need a certain amount of technical expertise to do that. For example, if you're developing your PPP law, or the secondary legislation on PPPs, or your value for money methodology. And the third area is, the third P, if you like, is the sort of project role, the project support or technical support role to help procuring authorities around the levels of government in helping to manage the process of preparing projects. Now the second thing to look at is that depending on those functions, and I'm not saying that all PPP units do all those functions, they do them in different combinations. The really important lesson is that you've got to look at what are the capacity gaps in government and then design your PPP unit to fit those capacity gaps. So in some countries the capacity gap might be that they really do need to support procuring authorities on the project support role. If that is the case, then you need to ask yourself the question, what is the correct structure for such a unit? Because if you are having to provide technical support, then the next question you might be facing is, how do you attract the right sort of individuals, experienced individuals from the private and the public sector, those with commercial experience, into your unit to perform that sort of role? And so to tackle that problem, some number of governments have created bodies that are not necessarily inside a Ministry of Finance, although most of them tend to be, but created agencies or publicly owned corporations which might have more flexibility to recruit and pay those sorts of people that you need to do a public service job. And then the third sort of big area is, where do you locate these units? Mostly, as I said, they're in ministries of finance or ministries of economy, and that's because those are the ministries that oversee or look over all the different sectors of government. But I'd say a very important lesson is that you're going to set up a unit at the first place, make sure it reports to a very senior level within government. Otherwise it'll be ignored by the rest of the government machinery. So report direct to the finance minister, or report direct to the economy minister, especially in the early days when you're really trying to send a message across the public sector and the private sector that you're serious about these units. A final point I would like to make that was raised by a secondary question was, well, should they be independent and should they perform some sort of regulatory role? And I'd say the answer to that is, well, PPPs are different. They are regulated by contracts. So you're not really looking for a regulator. That's a separate sort of function. And it's quite right, those sorts of entities should be separate from government. But a PPP unit is usually providing that internal expertise within government to manage a program well and to execute projects well.